Welcome to the Grit for Life, living wild and running free. We're laughing because, again, what you guys don't see on the other side of the camera is outtakes that are hilarious. We were doing a video and I was searching for a word and I was waiting for her to jump in with it, and she just looks at me and I'm like, we just had this conversation.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Right. But as you're aware, if you've been watching this video series, if you've been participating in this video series, my wife Katie has joined me on this workshop of bringing, I hope, some powerful information to you as Grit Nation. Let me just take this moment real quick. If you don't follow us on YouTube, follow us on the YouTube Grit for Life, as well as iHeartRadio and Spotify. And if you have the app for TikTok, then we're also on there as Grit Nation. But what I want the opportunity to be able to do is just be able to interview my wife and get her unique perspective on what it means to be, as a lady, what it means to live wild and free, taking what you've learned, taking what society tries to put out there in mass marketing production. My wife is someone who I truly am blessed and find myself lucky to have as my wife. She's very beautiful. And we talked about off camera the perspective of that, you know, that there are people out there that would look at you and say, oh, look at her. And yet you have your own insecurities, and learning that doesn't matter what shape, size, social status, whatever you may be. And we'll talk from a man's perspective in another video, excuse me, but you have your own securities, and each individual has their own securities. And so really what I'd like to do is just start off the interview. And let me ask you, when we first started talking about this workshop, and you heard me talk about it, I said, we're going to call this workshop Living Wild and Running Free. What does that mean to you?
So first I want to say that while I am a female and we're doing this, you're asking me for a female's perspective, I don't by any means consider myself to be the voice of all females. And I think that we as human beings fall on a spectrum, whether you want to include the genders, but when I talk about my perspective, I don't want to speak for every female,
right,
in that way. But for me, living wild and running free, it's a giant thing. But again, being authentically myself, unapologetically me, and like we were talking about earlier off camera, sometimes that means, oh goodness, now I'm gonna be all flustered and all over the board. Like, let's just take one aspect of it, like how I present myself to the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. Running wild and free for me, with even just my wardrobe. Some days that looks like I am wearing cowgirl boots and jeans and looking a certain stereotypical country girl. Other times I have a hippie dress on, a long flowy dress. Other times I'm wearing a costume to work, like Mary Poppins, or I put on a fairy outfit, or, like that. We as human beings don't have to fit in one box.
Let me stop you there for a second. Let me ask you this.
Good. Focus me more.
No, it's based upon what you're saying. You talk about not being put in a box, and you're talking about all the outfits you wear. And mm-hmm. One of the things that's really drawn me to my wife is she's a very open and free spirit. That's what I see in her. And I know that there are times you struggle with stuff, but let's talk about like the appearance and the aspect that how is it that you are able to come to the, because I know that there are women out there who do feel that they have to look a certain way. I know women that refuse to go out in public without makeup because no other reason than, oh my God, I might run into somebody.
Right. And there are days that I am like that as well. And for me, that has to do with my self confidence. So, speaking to a woman who can't walk out the door without makeup on, um, the reason I wear makeup is not for other people. It's not for you. It's for myself. And I've talked about this with Becca before. She's always wondered why I put on makeup. Like, why don't I just go with my natural beauty? I have other members of my family who are very much anti-makeup as well. And I don't, for some women, it could be attracting a mate. For some women, all I know is that for me, whatever I walk out the door in each day is to help me feel confident in myself.
But how do you get to that point where, I mean, have you always been that way?
No.
So how do you get to that point, again, with the context of living water free, breaking out of what society expects? I mean, there's someone out there who's going to be watching this who's really struggling. Maybe they don't wear makeup at all, and they don't feel beautiful. They don't feel confident. It doesn't matter whether they put makeup on or whether they don't, because of what society has made them believe about themselves. Maybe their weight, maybe I mean, I know, and I was kind of tied into this earlier. You talked about that whole Barbie aspect, like so.
So, and I articulated this really well earlier, and now I'm going to be on camera and not be able to articulate it in the same way. But we as women, it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like. We all have our insecurities. Society has put me in a box because of the way I look. I'm that Barbie. I'm that classic beauty. I may not see it that way, but I know that lots of people do look at me and see classic beauty. You could be on a cover of a magazine, like, and I don't like that. That makes me uncomfortable. But I was blessed with these genetics, for better or for worse. But that doesn't mean I don't have things that I am horribly insecure about. And it has taken me a very long time, and I still struggle with it. But there are a lot of things. Like, I think my butt is too flat. I think my boobs are too small. I don't like leaving the house without at least mascara on because my eyelashes are blonde, and I don't, like, that's a minor thing. But then it's also, over the years, I have realized, it doesn't matter what I do. People are always it's never gonna be good enough no matter what I do. I have to be good enough for myself. In that, would I like bigger boobs? Yes, but I'm not willing to go get a boob job to feel more confident about myself. So I have to accept what I have been given and be okay with that. Or if you're talking about, like, I don't feel like I have a butt. My butt's not round enough. I don't have enough curves. So then I went and put on some weight, and then I started negative talking about, now I'm too fat. Like, I had to battle my own views of myself and what I'm comfortable with. And it's been a really long process of really accepting who I am and loving myself for who I am at this very moment. And maybe I'm too skinny at this moment for my ideal or society's ideal, or maybe I put on too much weight. But you know what? I've also looked at, from an artist's point of view, has helped me a lot, is finding the beauty in everything. Finding, like, when I look at, and here's another thing, when I look at other women and compare myself to other women, the things that I tear myself down about, I find beauty in other women who have very similar things to me. Like, or I'm looking at my friends and I go, oh man, I wish I had XYZ that they have. But then they're sitting on the other side of the room thinking XYZ about me that they wish they had. And really, I think it's helped me a lot to understand that the more women I've talked to about insecurities, the more I understand that we all have them. As women, it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how overweight or how underweight, or we're all insecure about something. But when I look at other women, all I see is beauty. Like that's what I see as an artist. Is I'm like, that person is beautiful. So they're overweight, I still think they're beautiful, for various reasons. And learning to love the beauty in others has helped me learn to accept me and love the beauty in me, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So let me ask you, what are some steps that you can look back and say that you have taken to be able to, and I know you kind of said it, but like when we're talking to someone who's watching this video, a lady who's watching this video, and they're sitting there and they're either society has torn them down because of the way they look and they've put themselves in a cage or hidden themselves because they don't want to be in a cage. They want to be hidden. Or it's a significant other, maybe an ex, maybe a current spouse or significant other. What are some steps that you have started taking or are taking or have taken to really help you begin to become comfortable in your own skin?
So one of the things I can't remember where I saw this originally, but it was a YouTube video or a Facebook thing at some point, and this woman's talking to her younger self, and the concept of, would I say these negative things to my daughter, to my little girl? Would I say these things to my little girl self? How would that make me feel as a little girl? Would I, and even a step further, would I say it to my best friend? Would I tell my best friend that my nose is too big? Your nose is too big. Your eyebrows could really use a tweezing. Would you, like, all of those kinds of things about self-confidence and image? Do I say those things to my best friend? Do I say those things to my daughter? Do I say those things to the little girls in my classroom? I can't imagine saying stuff like that. The things that I was saying to myself, I can't imagine saying them to a little girl. I strive to build others up. So why am I tearing myself down so much? There is that little Katie, that little 6-year-old Katie, or that 13-year-old Katie who is struggling with insecurity still in there. Why am I continuing to tear her down instead of build her up and praise her for the things that are powerful and beautiful? Mm-hmm. And that really has impacted me a lot.
How hard was it to start changing that thought pattern?
It's really hard. I'm still working on it. I catch myself having negative self-talk all the time. And when it pops up, I have to go, would you say that to your daughter? Why are you saying it to yourself?
So it's a process. So
it's absolutely
it doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-mm.
And so it is hard. As soon as it gets hard, you have a choice of either to quit and go back to the old way of thinking and doing it and never feel good about yourself, never be wild and free.
Yep.
Or catch yourself, stop, recollect, and change your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to, one of the things that I love about you is your free spirit. I know that your free spirit did not come easy. You have been through a lot in your lifetime. You have, just like everybody else has a story, you have a story, and one day maybe you'll share it with Grit for Life. And throughout this video, I know there'll be some that you will share. you've already shared about growing up in that strong matriarch family, um, and you've been married before. You felt very insecure in that marriage due to the issue, the other, your ex husband's own issues that he had with his life, and somewhere along the way, you let yourself out of the cage, or are letting yourself out of the cage. How does that process look? What what has gotten you to where you are right now?
So, at various points in my life, I have been completely free and wild and out there. And then other times, for various reasons, I have let others put me back in a cage or put myself back in a cage for safety, personal safety reasons. You know, when we get wounded by life for whatever reason, it's so much easier. And I don't necessarily think of it as much of a cage as a cave, like our
Gotcha.
dog Whiskey, who goes into his little cubby in the closet for
Right.
safety. There have been various points, especially with our personal life,
Mm-hmm.
over the last 5 or 6 years. There has been trauma after trauma after
Mm-hmm.
trauma in our life for various reasons. And so for a while, I have retreated to my cave, my safety, my hidey hole of safety. And so a lot of the things that are authentically me, I was putting away because it wasn't safe. And because it also takes a lot of energy to live free. It is so much easier. In a lot of ways, it's so much easier to just hide in that cave or
Mm-hmm.
hide in the cage because it's easy. It takes a lot of energy to be authentically yourself sometimes because of everybody else pounding you with you should be this, you should be that, you know. um so how do I get flies, how do I get to this space where I am now, where I feel comfortable being
Mm-hmm.
wild and free? Is complicated. um it is working on, I mean, the majority of it is self-reflection. And
Which is a common theme in this.
it, it's self-reflection. And why am the why am I doing what I'm doing? What's the purpose? What's the reason? Why is it that I have this pattern of behavior? Constantly evaluating, am I in a stuck place? Why am I choosing to do these things that I am doing? What's the reasoning? What's the purpose? Am I being myself in this moment? Am I happy in this moment? Why am I not happy? And really evaluating.
Will you
And
always? Can you always be happy? Always.
no, no, no.
So so what do we do? Going back to, like, you talk about going into your cave of protection, and she talks refers to our dog Whiskey, who has this little cubby in his um in our closet. He's our dog has been through a lot. He was traumatized as a pup, and so he has those moments where he just needs to get away. That's okay.
Yes. And one of the things that has really helped me a lot is that it's okay to not be okay. It really is okay to not be okay. And I appreciate the happy moments so much more intensely because I have embraced the suck, as you have so wonderfully embedded in my brain as well. That our life is so much more beautiful and so much more rich because of what we have gone through to get to this happy place or this free place. I I don't know that I would ever truly understand what happiness is without having been through
Mm,
the horrid places.
mm-hmm.
those dark places. Like would do you really understand what the sunshine is until you've experienced the dark?
Yeah.
Do you really understand what it means to be cold unless you've been extremely hot? Like
Mm-hmm.
all of those opposite extreme emotions. And but the majority of life is lived in the gray area, in that I'm not incredibly intensely happy every moment, but I'm also not incredibly intensely sad in every moment.
And I think it goes back to that balance we've talked about in the series,
Mm-hmm.
is that you do everything requires a balance. And
Yes.
when things stop being okay, whether it be with your appearance, whether it be with your marriage,
A life
whether it be
event.
with life, it's when things become unbalanced. And I think that's where self reflection then has to be caught. Going back to you saying you catch yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When anything begins to feel off balance and out of whack, and beginning to feel as if you're being held captive, exactly what you said, you stop and you say, okay, things are not balanced. They're not always going to be balanced. But that's when the self reflection starts. You stop and you say, okay, I'm not happy with myself. I'm not happy with my life. I may not be happy with my marriage or my career or whatever. Stop. What part in the imbalance do I play? My response is my responsibility. So, what am I going to do? And do that hard work of self reflecting to be able to take a look. Talking about going back to that cave aspect of it, how easy would it be? I got two questions. I'm going to ask this first one and then I'm going to ask the second one follow up once you answer it. How easy would it be to stay in that cave?
So easy. It doesn't take a ton of energy. I mean, it does in some ways, but it's a lot easier to stay in the safety.
Yeah.
It's comfortable. It's it doesn't require as much work.
How happy and free can we be staying there?
Not very. There are moments, to me, there are moments of happy and calm and peace
Right.
in that place. But staying there all the time is what leads to, for me personally, is what leads to severe depression, leads to a lot more anxiety, um, because I'm constantly worried about the outside getting in,
Yeah.
or stepping outside into the unsafe zone of reality.
Right.
So it's a vicious cycle and spiral to stay in that cave. To retreat to it for moments of downpour is one thing, but to live in there when it is beautifully sunny outside is
Uh,
a different.
and I think that's a great analogy because, we're out here in the desert. We have a lot of mesa, rock, and things like that around us. If we were to get a monsoon, yeah, absolutely, we would want to find shelter like in a cave. But we wouldn't want to just stay trapped there once the sun came back out.
No.
And I think in our lives, we allow society, we allow the pressures of the world, and without that self-reflection, we get into the cave, we get stuck in the cave. And what my wife said about depression, I think that's where we find, if you're finding yourself depressed, if you're finding yourself constantly in this state of depression and darkness, then you need to stop and start that self-reflection, and you need to ask yourself, okay, my response is my responsibility. What part of this is, what can I change? And yes, it's scary to now go back outside the cave. The world may have changed. Or maybe the thing that ran you into the cave is still there.
Yeah.
But am I going to face it? Or am I going to stay in this cave and starve to death? And when I say starve, I don't mean necessarily starve of food. We as humans, it is important to have that interaction with other humans. It is that important to begin to continue to grow, and we can't grow inside that cave. And so I challenge you, and I hope that you've heard my wife's heart, and I hope that you've gained something out of it. And we may even revisit this. What we do after each video is we talk about, hey, what are some things that we wanted to talk about that didn't get talked about for the sake of time? And so we may come back to it. She's also going to interview me from my perspective. But what I want you to do now is what I want you to do.
Did you have a second question you wanted to ask me?
Well, it's staying into the cave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Also careful. Sometimes there's a bear in the cave too. So.
Oh, bear in the cave. But no, that is true though. I mean, but you go into that cave and you find out that the enemy that you're trying to run from is actually in a way yourself.
Yep.
And now you've trapped yourself inside that cage or that cave with yourself, and you are the enemy.
Yep.
And so, what I want you to do today for today's soul portion is men and women, but more so women. Well, let's do it this way. Women, I want you to write and just journal what you got from what Katie has shared today. And if you want to share it on the Facebook page, if you're watching this on the Facebook group, share it, because I think that's important for each of you women to see what the other woman is seeing, and that you begin to see you're not alone. And then I want you to write a step that you're going to be taking in the next couple of days based upon what Katie has shared. How does that look like for you though? Make it personal. Don't just take what she has said and rewrite it. I want you to make it personal for you, because as she stated, each individual is different. But the principle is there. And we already talked about living those principles. Men, what I want you to do is write down for the woman in your life, whether it be a significant other, a future significant other, just some friends. Mother.
Sister.
What is it that you gain from this that you can use to change in your life to help encourage that lady in your life to be able to see the beauty of who she is as the person she is here and now. And babe, I just want to tell you that, and not just because we're on camera, but I do appreciate you, and I love you, and the spirit that you bring to our family. We are the family we are today because of the self-reflection and the work that you have done, and the beauty that you are, and what you're teaching our daughters and even our sons, and how to, what to look for. It's, I think, the best praise that a woman can get is when our daughters come to you and ask you for advice, as well as our sons when they have a girlfriend and they talk about, in side conversations, we hear them say, well, they're a lot like Katie. And that shows that you're doing something right. And so I thank you for that. So your response is your responsibility. You have your soul portion of this. I hope that you got something out of this. Again, this is 4 weeks. I know this is, sometimes we hit on some really rough subjects. And reach out to the grit leaders if you need someone to talk to. Reach out to, if you're doing this through our Facebook group, reach out to the other participants and go grit it.